This has been so crazy trying to get this finished, and I have to say, and I hate to admit it, that I am refilming this the day before it's supposed to release, but all that matters is that it's going to be finished. So excited, and I'm so glad you're here. I have to say, I have struggled so much with what I wanted to talk about, and I didn't know if I wanted to pivot and talk about something else or maybe something completely different that I hadn't thought about yet. But I really feel like God has just put it so heavily on my heart to talk about the things that are currently in my season of right now. To give a little backstory on that, I feel like I have probably come out of one of the hardest seasons of my life, and I just found myself so anxious, and I didn't have a lot of confidence and struggling with so much doubt. And I realized in this time of my life that there weren't that many people on social media or YouTube or making podcasts that honestly I felt like I could relate to. And here recently, I've just been so excited to help be that influence and help hopefully be a light to other people who have been in the same situation as me. I have decided that this podcast episode is going to be about navigating the season after a breakup. And I honestly think that a lot of people do not do this well. And I feel like I can say that because I've seen it so many times in my life that I just have not navigated it very well. So I want to say this too. Even if you are not going into a season after a breakup, I feel like this is still so relevant to you, whether your chapters are ending or something is changing, or maybe you're stepping into a different point in life, whatever it may be. I definitely think that even if this is not relevant to you, or you feel like you are not in any way, shape, or form in a season where this would fit, I still think that it is really good, and I think it could help maybe other people around you, or maybe you in the future. I also want to say that not every podcast is going to be about relationships and breakups. So just definitely stay tuned. We will be dropping a new episode every Thursday. So just to give a little introduction to me, my name is Faith Drew, and I'm 21, and I live in the great state of Kentucky. And I am honestly just so thrilled about this and walking into this next chapter of my life. My biggest heart for this podcast is just to help other girls and other women walk in their identities, that they are chosen and they are set apart for a purpose, and just be able to walk radiantly free. Not just, oh, I'm set free, but I am radiantly free, and I radiate the joy and love and hope that God has given me. And that is just my heart for this podcast. I feel like that kind of covers a lot of the bases. So let's jump into the podcast. I think whenever we are going through chapters ending or breakups, there is so much time and emotion that is just all over the place. Things that would normally take up our time are no longer there. Things that normally wouldn't bother us are now making us just emotional and a mess. And so my number one piece of advice is, if you are getting out of a season of any sort, is to make God the center of the next place that you're in. So if you are just getting out of a breakup, the first thing you need to do before anything else is just to take it to God, grow your relationship with Him, talk to Him, lean on Him, read the Bible, open up your Bible. I cannot tell you how important this is. And I know sometimes it's hard. The last thing you want to do is read. You just want to cry and be sad. But it is honestly so important for you to just dive into God's Word and let Him define you. Let Him say who you are. I think that this was just such a big moment for me, was whenever I made the shift of knowing about God and knowing God. There is such a huge mindset shift whenever you truly, truly know God as a real Father and in a real relationship. You start to realize that when you know Him, you love Him, and when you love Him, you trust Him, and when you trust Him, you trust what He says about you. You believe Him when He says that you are chosen and you have a purpose and He has a plan and a destiny and a future for you. You believe Him when He says you are beautiful and confident And the list could go on and on and on. But that was just so impactful to me whenever I shifted my view to, wow, God is so good and He is so gracious and He is so real. And if He says that I am beautiful and I am chosen and I am worthy and I am confident, then you best believe that I am beautiful, I am worthy, I am chosen, I am confident, and nothing can take that away. No moment of sadness, no moment of grief or anxiety or loneliness could ever rip you away from knowing that more than anything, God is the ultimate relationship and the ultimate thing that defines you, and there is just such a beauty and a freedom in that. And so I definitely have to say the number one thing you can do is make God the center of your season. And I think the more you do that, the more you realize that you are so much more able to go into that next step of life because you've built such a firm foundation in Him and who He says you are. And there is just something so unstoppable about that knowledge and knowing who He is. So that's my number one. I think that sort of leads into number two, because I think that so often as Christians, we think that we're not allowed to grieve, or we can only be so sad for so long. And while yes, I'm not saying sit in your grief and sit in your sadness, I am saying that it is okay to be sad. It's okay to not be perfectly happy when a season is ending and a chapter is closing, because God says that He is close to the brokenhearted, and He says that because He knew we would be brokenhearted. And I know for me, I do not grieve very well. I try to just move on to the next thing. I'm like, okay, let's hurry up. Let's move on to the next. Let's ignore this. I don't want to pay attention to it. I want to pretend like it never happened. I do not want to feel the pain. And again, don't sit in it, but it was harming me more than it was doing me good, because instead of fixing the problem and walking through the emotion, I would just hide it, and it would bleed through in other areas of my life. And it was just, honestly, it was making me miserable, and I didn't even realize it. So allow yourself to grieve. And I think such a good story for this is the story of Joseph. And my friend actually gave a teaching on this at my young adult group at church a few months ago, and it was just so profound to me because she was talking about Joseph's relevance in a waiting season. I couldn't help but think about Joseph whenever he was put in jail, and he was not supposed to be there. He did nothing wrong. Can you imagine having these dreams that God has given you, and you find yourself at the very, very bottom with no hope of escape, like you were in jail? And I can imagine that he grieved. Even Joseph, who God gave these beautiful dreams, still had to go through things that made him grieve. And yes, God redeemed, and God had a plan and a purpose, and Joseph, I'm sure, held on to those dreams, but he still was grieving in the current season he was in. And so I just feel like it is so important for us to be able to grieve and walk and navigate through those emotions and those feelings of disappointment and frustration and hurt. Because if we don't, I feel like we just a lot of times stuff them down, and it ends up hurting us so much more. So that is a big part of my second piece of advice is you do not have to be 100% happy and feel like you are, okay, this is over. Okay, next, I'm not going to let it faze me because God's plan is so good. And yes, it is. And I promise you, it is so good and it is so much better. But it is also so important for you to not just ignore that something hurt and something changed and something was not how you thought it was going to be. So in that, though, you can't sit in misery and just constantly be like, oh my gosh, well, I lost this thing and it meant so much to me, and I just can't imagine my life without it, and I'm going to sit here and I'm not going to do anything because this isn't fair and I don't want it and it hurts. I'm not saying that, but I am saying to navigate through it and allow God into the hurt and ask Him questions, because there are some times that I've just been like, okay, God, why? What the heck is going on? And he's just been such a steady voice, be like, hey, just trust me and watch what I'm going to do and where I'm going to take you. And there's just been a beauty in that. So I also want to say this too, like, don't rush yourself. I feel like for me, I'm just sort of an all or nothing type of girl. If I am upset, I'm like, okay, let me get rid of everything. I don't want to think about it. Let me just get it out of my life and I'm just going to move forward and whatever. And I realized that I was actually hurting myself so much more than I thought because I was running off of this huge emotional adrenaline rush. And I started to realize that if I had just given myself a few days and didn't act upon my emotions, I would have been so much better if I had just given myself a moment to handle things when I was ready. So I think that you definitely need to be able to take a step back, and you don't have to immediately throw everything away. You don't have to immediately get rid of it. If it's hurting you and it's making you upset to see things, obviously I encourage you to box it up and get it out of your sight, and you don't want to be sitting in misery. Again, don't do that. But I do think it is so wise to just take a minute and take a step back. Don't feel like you have to pretend it never happened. Don't feel like you just have to move on to the next thing. It is so important for you to be able to walk through every aspect of that grieving process, of that moving on process, of that, okay, I need to grow my independence back. Because when you're in a relationship and you are constantly with someone, talking to someone, you are affected by them and they influence you, and obviously over time they become a huge part of your life. And so whenever that's taken away, you have to start to build yourself back up and realize, okay, this is who I am. This is what I want for myself. Let's resituate our plans for the future, because a lot of times that's one of the hardest parts, is you're giving up this hope of what was going to be in the future and you have to completely rewrite it. So give yourself a minute to just relax and slow it down, slow down those emotions and take a step back. And I want to say this too. If you cannot go a few days without texting them or without making this big emotional decision, it's probably not the best. Because as we all know, girl, those emotions are fickle and they will change at the flip of a switch. So just allow yourself to wait a second. Whenever you get really lonely, or it's nighttime, or you just feel like this is the end and you just gotta text them, I promise you, if you just wait, you will be so much more clear-headed and you will be so much more proud of yourself, and you will realize that you are stronger than you think. You are just so much more confident in yourself and your capability whenever you do things that are hard. And I think whenever we are super emotional and everything is emotionally weighing on us, it is so easy to do something easy, because it's like, okay, yes, this is really hard right now, but if I do this, it won't be as hard. But you are just perpetuating the pain. And I think it is just so important to look at yourself right now and be like, okay, yes, this is really hard right now, but let me take myself out of this emotion and put myself a little bit later in the future. How am I going to feel? What do I really want? Outside of your feelings, where do you think you would be if you made that decision? And is that where you want to be? And if it's not, it's your emotion talking. And I encourage you to find someone that you can reach out to, a strong friend, and or maybe a leader or a mentor, or someone that you can just be like, hey, I'm struggling right now and I need a little bit of help. And I actually got that advice from a girl that I went to lunch with, and it was just so impactful to me, because in those moments that it's hard, it is so easy to do what's easy. So just take a second, pull away and put yourself in the future of how is this going to affect me and is this what I want? And I think it is so important to have community. You need to have people around you who are in your corner, who are encouraging you, who are lifting you up and speaking life into your situation, and who are able to tell you things that might not be so easy. It's also really good to have someone who has been through more life than you, because they can be like, hey, I've been here, I know how hard it is, and this is what I've learned, or this is where God has taken me, and it just sort of helps you make those decisions going forward because you don't feel like it's just you figuring it all out. You have other people who can influence you in a good, godly way, and that helps propel you forward to moving on and moving in the right direction. Moving on is not moving to the next relationship. If you feel like you have to jump from one relationship to another, I promise you that what you need more than anything is just time. Time to figure out yourself, because I found myself just going from long-term relationship to long-term relationship to long-term relationship, and I never gave myself time to figure it all out. So I really, really highly encourage you to find people who will be very truthful to you, but that are very solid in their faith and that their advice and the wisdom that they are giving you is actually fruitful and will help you going forward, not hinder you in the moment. Because I know it's really easy to just try to go numb the pain and to fall into a lifestyle that is just very seemingly excitable and busy, but I can guarantee you that those small intimate gatherings and those lunches and those events and spending time at church and with people who are speaking life into you are so much more fruitful and life-giving and bring you so much more long-term joy than anything else. So definitely advise you to find that person, or maybe it's multiple people, but don't try to go put your identity into anything that involves another relationship. And everyone's timeline is going to be different. Some people end up finding the person for them very quickly. Some people don't. But if you do find yourself in a pattern that you are serial dating, you are just going through them, you need to just take your step back and don't rush not only your healing process, but don't rush yourself into the next relationship to where you never give yourself a time to heal. And something that really helped me is I did not realize how much I needed my family, because it is so easy to be with your family all the time and not really let them in. You're like, okay, I'm not going to tell them all of this and I'm just going to go through it myself. And it was so healing for me to be with my family. I have to say, one of the most encouraging things for me too has been being with my siblings, because it hit me recently that what if the only advice I ever got to give my 16-year-old sister is by the example that I lead, not by the advice that I give. Not by the advice that I give because she asked me and I was telling her, but it was simply based off how she sees my life and how I respond to situations and how I respect myself and honor myself. And that was just so mind-blowing to me, because sometimes you are just so caught up in the idea that you are the main character in this big old world, when the reality of it is everyone has their own personal lives and you are affecting the people around you. And it is so important that you have something bigger than yourself when you're making a decision. And so I feel like that's been so good for me, is just to see myself influencing my younger sister. And if I wouldn't want it for her, why would I want it for myself? It has just been good for me to be more involved with my family, because it's helped me stitch back the pieces that I have lost over the course of time, because my family knows me from the moment that I was born. They know everything about me, everything I've gone through, and it's just been really good to help hold me accountable and help me fall more into a normal me environment. So that's just been beautiful and so good. I think the next big thing that you can do is to find something new, whether it is that group of people or small group, or it's a new hobby or a new job or something you're working towards. And for me, a lot of it has been the podcast and figuring out, okay, what are my next steps? That has been really good for me to have something to look forward to and be excited about and fill my time and work on. And you have to be the one that decides what that is for you. And some people love working, some people love just art and movies and whatever it may be, whatever makes your heart sing. Go and pursue those things, because if not now, when? And so I highly, highly, highly encourage you, find your people. And if you don't have people, go somewhere new. I know it's scary to go meet new people because you're like, oh my gosh, what if they don't like me? Or I'm not going to know anybody. That's just, what am I going to say? What am I going to talk about? I promise you, people are so much less scary than you think. And I feel like 9 out of 10 people really don't care to have conversations with you and to talk to you and get to know you. But take that first step into getting into a new group of people. I have gained so many friends and so many relationships just because I decided to try out a new church, and now I have a bunch of girls around me that I just love so dearly. And I encourage you, if you don't have somewhere, start going to a new church, join a Bible study group. Go to a coffee shop, wherever you feel like you are going to be around other people that you can meet good, strong friendships. Go for it. I feel like that is just so, so important. I want to say this too. While yes, I am giving advice and I am talking about all of these things, I want you to know that I am figuring it out just like you are. I am by no means perfect, and these are just things that I'm learning, or I have learned that I'm implementing and trying to grow better in. So don't feel discouraged. You are so much stronger than you think. And I know that it's really hard right now, but I promise if you give yourself some time and you allow yourself to become stronger in your identity in Christ and who He calls you to be, and stronger in your confidence, and to go chase after the things that you want and get new community groups and be around people who love you and support you, you will quickly realize that you are the happiest, healthiest version of yourself, and you are so much stronger than you think. Don't feel like just because someone else may seem to have it all together that you're not ever going to get there. You are so much more than able.